The Gateway brings you the day's news each weekday from around the St. Louis region and the state capitals in Jefferson City.
Our schools are accredited. We don't need this bill.
And Springfield.
How many more years must pass before lawmakers see time is of the essence?
I'm Abby Larico. Join me each weekday for The Gateway on the STLPR app or wherever you get podcasts.
Former State Senator Jamilah Nasheed just completed a very eventful tenure in the Missouri General Assembly. The St. Louis Democrat combined an activist streak with pragmatic legislating, and on this edition of Politically Speaking, Nasheed looks back at some of the key moments of her legislative career and looks forward to the future of St. Louis politics. Let's hit the music.
This is the Politically Speaking podcast, the definitive show about Missouri politics.
It's a little complicated in Bolivar because there is a Parsons family there.
But we also knew that it was important to make sure that we got to where we needed to go.
You know, if you walk in a room and you're getting ready to make a decision and everybody in the room looks like you need to stop.
And right now what happens in the United States Senate is as critical as anywhere else in the country.
I really want the state to succeed.
Well, we want everybody to know that we're all working together.
I just worked hard to try to build my name where I didn't have the money.
And welcome to Politically Speaking. I'm your host, St. Louis Public Radio political correspondent Jason Rosenbaum. Joining me from her home in St. Louis, the now former state senator from Missouri's 5th senatorial district,
Jamilah Nasheed.
Thank you so much, Senator, for joining me. This is going to be another exit interview of Politically Speaking, because I have found that talking to former lawmakers about their time in Jefferson City tends to be sometimes more interesting than talking about the things when they're in office, because they can be a little bit more candid. Because you were always very, close to the vest and cautious when you were in the legislature, Senator.
Oh, absolutely. I can truly say that I can say whatever I like right now. I'm done. I don't have to be politically correct anymore.
So there were a number of things about your tenure that I think were notable from a historical standpoint. You are the first senator from the 5th District to serve the entire 8 years since Jet Banks.
And thank God, no scandals. Wasn't planning on having any scandals, but I came out of the Senate as well as the House with no political scandals, and that is sometimes very hard to do while serving in the legislature.
Were you the first Muslim senator as well?
I wasn't the first Muslim to serve in the Missouri Capitol. Rodney Hubbard, as you well know, he's Muslim. T.D. El-Amin, Yafet El-Amin, all Muslims. But I was the first to serve in the Senate.
The other thing, too, that I think maybe we can touch on is there's been a lot of talk about Cori Bush going from activism to elected office. And that has happened, in the last couple of years with Bruce Franks, John Collins Muhammad, Rasheen Aldridge. You were kind of the precursor to all that. You were an activist for many years before you ever ran for anything.
Yeah, Senior Clay was doing it way before as young Turks were, right?
I was just gonna.
He literally went to jail for the Jefferson Bank,
I was gonna say, but this does happen in cycles, and I'm glad you mentioned Bill Clay Sr., who I think very highly of. I've been reading a lot of his books. I understand. I'm not naive. He wasn't universally beloved when he was office, and Lacey Clay obviously wasn't either.
And I wasn't either among some of my party members.
But let's talk about that. How did the transition from activism to elected office go for you? Because from the outside looking in, some people may be surprised that you had this, activist past, because they may be like, wow, Jamilah Nasheed, you were way too conciliatory with Republicans, or you tried to compromise too much. But it did seem like the two sides of your persona intertwined quite a bit, which made you such a fascinating person to cover.
Yeah. Well, let me just say this here. While serving in the legislature, I knew that, I had to work across party lines. Okay. When you are an activist, you really, there's no room for negotiating. Okay. You gonna let my people free, or you gonna let my people go, or we going to jail. Okay. And that's how it is on the ground. Okay. But when you up there and you're legislating, and you're trying to pass legislation, and you're trying to get things done, there's going to be a lot of give and take. And so, I had to find that middle course, that it was not going to always be my way or no way. You can do that. You can You can put the pedal to the metal when you're out on the street, and when you agitating, aggravating, and advocating on the street level. You can take it to the extent where you say, listen, I'm going to do civil disobedience. I'm going all the way out for the purpose of making sure that my people who I represent get their fair share when it comes to equity. On a state level, you have to be a little bit more pragmatic. Okay, you have to figure out, okay, if I'm going to get this bill passed that is going to help the Urban League, if I'm going to put billions of dollars in the budget to help Urban League, then I can't be throwing grenades. Okay, if I want to be able to help Mission St. Louis and the young men coming out of prison to try to find their place in society after re-entering society, I'm going to have to figure out how I can be more diplomatic. And so that's what I was able to do. And as a result of being able to do that, I was instrumental in passing various pieces of legislation that impacts the quality of life for the people that I represent in the 5th Senatorial District. I'll give you one good piece of legislation. There was a nuisance property legislation where we have individuals who live out of state. They own property in the 5th Senatorial District. They don't keep the property up. Okay, very hard to find. So what I was able to do was pass legislation where individual war organizations can go after those individuals because of a nuisance and that they're bringing their property values down. So that the type of legislation that I have been able to pass, Harris-Stowe State University, for the first time in history, Harris-Stowe, out of 150 years, they didn't have the right to offer graduate a degree. But, Jason, I'm just saying that, in order to be able to get things done while you're in the control of the Republican House, the Senate, and the super majority, as well as the governor's mansion, the Republicans control everything in the state of Missouri. There is no way, in a million years, I could have gone in there and stayed the way that I once were as an activist, throwing grenades, no compromise, because it was either my way or no way when I was out there being lifted up off the railroad tracks for minority inclusion during the Metrolink expansion.
Well, it's interesting that we started off this conversation this way, because when I first started covering Missouri politics, it seemed like the conflicts, especially in Black St. Louis politics, were completely different than what they are now. Like when you ran against Robin Wright Jones in 2012, you two had pretty different views on a lot of things. It was really it really seemed like it was a battle of ideas and differing perspectives. It seems that now that you're out, it's less about whenever there's a big primary or a big fight, it's less about ideas and more about personalities. That's been my observation. Have you found that too, or do you really think that there are dividing lines on issues?
Yeah, it's kind of shifting towards identity politics now, so to speak. But when I was coming up and I ran against Robin, Robin, she had the same type of issues that was concerning to her that's concerning to me. Especially when it comes to the quality of life for the most indigent people here in the city of St. Louis. And I say that, the difference between Robin and myself is I come from nothing. I come from the Doris Webby housing projects. I was able to see the indigent. I was able to see how indigent people lived. I was impoverished. So I couldn't only just sympathize, I can empathize because I lived it. I was waiting on, my grandmother waited on a once a month check, which was probably about $300 a month, to feed 4 children, and so I understand that, in order to be able to change the narrative and change people's lives, it starts with policies. Policies, they are direct correlations to what's happening in everyday people's lives. When you have young men coming out of prison, knocking on the doors of opportunities and the doors are slammed in their faces because they have a stigma of being an ex-felon, and they walk towards that door and they can't get a job. That's why I had to change the policy. I had to be able to say, even if you have been convicted of a felon, you should be able to write on an application without having to put a stamp of approval that you was an ex-felon and they throw it in the trash can. So those are policies that had to be changed, and so what we're seeing happening right now is a lot of people moving towards identity politics. It's who I know, who I'm familiar with, who I can align myself with, because the same thing, the same policies we've been fighting for decades, increases in wages, pro-choice, pro-life issues, gun rights issues, health equality, all of those issues and all of those policies have been the battleground for both Republicans and Democrats for decades. What I pride myself on was making sure that I did things on a state level that impacts the people that voted me in.
Well, and I think I've asked you about this before. Obviously, like, raising minimum wage is like a big Democratic drawing point, as is Medicaid expansion.
It's a wedge. I call it wedge issue.
Now, but the interesting thing about that is both of those actually happened via ballot initiatives, but a lot of people wanted them on specific years in order to, like, help Claire McCaskill or to help Nicole Galloway. They wanted them to be turnout mechanisms rather than actual policy achievements. Maybe they wanted the policy achievements with the turnout mechanisms too. But isn't that kind of a cynical way of, like, pursuing major policies like that? Shouldn't you want to pass the policy because it's good policy, not that it's going to get 0.5% more for Claire McCaskill or Nicole Galloway? Or do you think that sort of political cynicism is worth it if you end up raising the minimum wage or expanding Medicaid?
Well, I think if you can get 2 for 1, there's nothing wrong with it. And so I'm a firm believer. A 2 is better than 1. Especially if we can get a congresswoman and a minimum wage increase, why not do it? Okay. And so, however, I don't think that if we knew that we were able to get it done in the state house, I don't think we should I don't think we should play politics with any policy, a ballot initiative, if we know that we can get it done. But if you can't get it done, a lot of people now are moving towards ballot initiatives because it's very difficult to get anything done on a state level with the Republicans controlling the House, the Senate, and the governor's mansion, as well as the supermajority. Because again, if Democrats were in office, they would be pushing their agenda too with the supermajority.
The first time you were on Politically Speaking in 2013, you were actually the second guest, by the way. You mentioned that your biggest regret was voting to repeal campaign donation limits.
Yes.
But here's the thing, and I'm sorry if this comes off as an opinion, but I think it's an objective fact. They did pass campaign donation limits via ballot initiative, and everybody agrees that it's been an abject failure.
Let me just say this here. I don't think it worked, but I don't feel like every day I think about it, I voted for it. I didn't want that in my head that Jamilah voted to lift campaign limits, right?
Well, you did.
Well, obviously,
but I did.
let me continue.
And I regret it, Jason, I regret it. And to this day, I always say that was a poor piece of legislation that I voted on. Okay. Now, what we had before then, you had individuals like a Rex Sinkfield that can have 100 committees, and there was no transparency whatsoever. Now, all you have to do is create a PAC, okay, and you can get as much money as you want from these PACs.
It's farcical. It's farcical because you can just literally have somebody create a PAC. You could tell a Rex Sinkfeld to donate $1 million to that PAC, and that PAC could spend $1 million of ads helping you. I'm sorry, but Amendment 2 in 2016 was an absolute failure. And I think it's kind of showcases the limits of doing ballot initiatives. Because I know we just went through this whole situation with Clean Missouri, which I know you were a supporter of, where, well, we got to respect the will of the people. And it basically made this idea that ballot initiatives were sacrosanct and we shouldn't change. Well, I think everybody would love to change Amendment 2 from 2016 because it's just completely ineffective.
Well, I think that sometimes ballot initiatives can have unintended consequences. And we see it often during ballot initiatives, to the extent where you have to sometimes go back and fix it on a legislative level. And so sometimes, ballot initiatives can have unintended consequences. But I think at the end of the day, the people voted for it. And if they want to change anything that they have voted for that are now having unintended consequences, they should take it back to the ballot and vote against it.
We'll be right back after this quick break with former Senator Jamilah Nasheed.
If you have a smart speaker, you have access to the entire world of NPR and St. Louis Public Radio. All the latest news and all the captivating stories. Activate our voices with yours by telling your smart speaker to play St. Louis Public Radio.
And we're back on Politically Speaking with former state senator Jamilah Nasheed. She is a Democrat from St. Louis. So I kind of want to delve into St. Louis politics because I know that from talking with you offline, you're best known as like a legislator that has, as you mentioned, been very effective at passing things and getting money for things. But you also seem to be very much enamored with St. Louis politics. And also like on a local level, like I've had conversations with you about like the inner workings of the Board of Aldermen. It's like you've been in the Board of Aldermen for like 20 years. You know pretty much everything on that point. I now live in St. Louis County, and St. Louis County politics has become very fractious and controversial. Where do you kind of see the state of play for St. Louis politics right now? Obviously, there's going to be a mayor's race coming up pretty soon. Yeah, I want to hear your opinion on that.
Well, we're about to see some drastic changes here in the St. Louis area when it comes to politics. We're about to see something that we have never seen before. It's going to be uncharted waters. It's going to be new for everyone. What we're talking about is reducing the Board of Aldermen to 14. What we're talking about is redistricting, where a lot of the wards may have to merge, where you may have to see state reps running against other state reps. You may see aldermen running against other aldermen, which is going to be ugly all across the board. And then you have a new mayor. You're going to have a new mayor that's trying to recover from a pandemic. So it's going to be some uncharted waters here. And so in order for, you have to be a very methodical, a thinker and a leader in order to be able to juggle all of those balls. And you have to be one that knows how to build alliances and coalitions. And if you're not able to do that, especially as a mayor, this city will wind up looking like Detroit. And I hope that doesn't happen. And I hope that is not the case. But we need someone that is going to be able to look at all of the dynamics that's about to happen within the next 5 to 10 years and see how one is going to be able to juggle those balls, bring people together for the betterment of this city, so that we can have a place where they talk about working, playing, and having fun in.
So let's talk about the mayor's race. By the time that this podcast airs, the mayor's race will be set. There are going to be a number of candidates under this new system where you can vote for as many people as you want. I think this is going to be fascinating because the first round of elections is going to be who can make it to the April runoff. And I do think that Louis Reed is well positioned to be one of those people just because I think he has appeal both in North St. Louis and South St. Louis. I think the bigger question is whether it's going to be Tashara Jones or Kara Spencer, who's that second person. I think Tashara Jones also has that crossover appeal, but Kara Spencer has never run citywide before, so I don't know if she has that. How do you? I think that you've been a supporter of Tashara Jones, but I do want to hear kind of your breakdown of where this race goes from here.
Well, I think that the two top vote getters that will move on to the general election will be Tashara Jones and Louis Reed. Both of them are statewide office holders. Well, Tashara is a statewide.
Citywide, you mean?
Yeah. And so I think that, and they run statewide. Okay. Both Tashara and Lewis as president, as treasurer. So they both have name ID. Okay. They have name ID. People, Tashara ran before in the past. I mean, she gets a lot of earned media, even though it's negative, but it's some earned media is always good. Just spell her name right. Okay. And so people know who she is, right? I think that the telling factor is going to be the general primary. Okay. The general primary is where all hell breaks loose. Okay. That's going to determine the next mayor. Okay. And the general primary, the general, not the primary, the general election. I meant to say the general election. So it was a general election, but in the general election, you're going to have Tashara Jones and you're going to have Lewis Reed. My prediction. Now, the question is this: who's sophisticated to go after all of those other individuals that was in the race to try to get their people to jump on board with their candidacy?
That's going to be that's a really interesting point, because in the general, let's just say the whole vote for whoever you want or how many people you want doesn't take hold and people just vote for one person, which is a very strong possibility. Well, the people that voted for Spencer and Jones are going to consolidate. But I think what the so-called progressives really need to be mindful of is that it's not a traditional mayor's race. It's not a situation where Lewis Reed needs to win 60% of Southwest St. Louis and he's the mayor. All he needs to do, because he has support in North St. Louis, is he needs to win 52%, 53% of Southwest St. Louis. And if he wins large parts of North St. Louis, that's enough. I think that he has a lot of advantages going into this race that people need to understand. But so does Tashara Jones or Spencer too. They have advantages too.
But look, take a look at my race. Take a look at my race with Board of Alderman president with Lewis Reed, right? Lewis, I won 13 wards, right? Lewis won 5 wards and won the election. Okay. So if those individuals in the 5 wards that he won when he ran for president, if they come out in a way that they came out for him during the time that he was trying to hold his post at the Board of Aldermen as president and bring in the central corridors, grab a little bit from the central corridors and grab a little bit from North St. Louis, that's a possibility that he can win. But Lewis, 60% of the people in the Board of Aldermen race voted against Lewis. Lewis won with 40% of the vote. Okay. I had 30%. Megan Green had 29 point something, don't quote me. And Lewis had 40%. Now, if Tashara can get my votes, all of the votes that I've received, because I got over 50% in North St. Louis, she's going to have to cover over 50% of North St. Louis.
And she didn't do that, but that's the thing. She did not do that in 2017. Lewis Reed, who came in third, won a lot of North St. Louis in 2017. And this time, I don't really like using the whole establishment versus progressive label, because I think it kind of really oversimplifies St. Louis politics. But he is going to have the establishment financial and organizational support that Cruzen had. Like, clearly the fact that Jack Coder and Greg Daly are not running, that organization is going to go to Lewis Reed. And if he has a more well-organized and well-financed campaign than he did in 2017 or 2019, he's formidable. But I also think Tashara Jones is formidable too, because she was attacked pretty substantially last year and she won overwhelmingly. And I'm not going to just say that Kara Spencer has no chance either, because she has a lot of significant support too.
And this is what I don't want to happen in the first round, is that everybody start beating up on each other, and then you cultivate this bad blood, and you're not sophisticated enough to get over your feelings and your egos and your emotions, and then you decide not to throw your hat behind the person that went on to the second phase of it. Okay, the general.
Right.
You understand what I'm saying? And so,
No, I
so
understand.
sometimes if it get too muddy, if you get too muddy in the waters, it's hard to take that dirt up off of you, right? And
Right.
so you want to make sure that you walk a thin line, that you don't go too far out and start attacking your opponents in the primary, where in the general, because they're not sophisticated enough to build alliances, even though they've been wounded. You wind up losing some allies.
Wouldn't it be best if you're Tashara Jones and Kara Spencer? Shouldn't you just send a bunch of mailers, say vote for Kara Spencer and Tashara Jones, and make sure we're the top two candidates to block Lewis Reed out? Or is that just not going to happen? Because that may be the way, like, Lewis Reed doesn't make it.
Now I'm asking you a question. So to block Lewis Reed out, and then Tashara run against who?
Kara Spencer.
Now,
well, y'all be thinking hard.
Antonio French wrote an article in the Post-Dispatch talking about the dangers of Proposition D. And Jimmy Matthews is not going to make it this time because you need signatures. But he basically brought up the scenario like, if you're a well-funded candidate and you just want to automatically win, just say vote for me and Jimmy Matthews. Now, in this instance, I'm not trying to say Kara Spencer is Jimmy Matthews, but if you don't want Lewis Reed to make it to the second round, and I do think that he probably will, just why aren't Spencer and Tashara Jones just running essentially as a ticket for the first round and then, fighting it out in the second round?
I think you all are underestimating the voters, and the electorate. We have a lot of well-educated voters here that they read, they go out in the snow, rain, sleet or hail. They're going to go out and they're going to vote, and they're paying attention, and they can see. They can see when individuals playing games, and I don't think people will like that, I don't think people will like that. There is like, it's too shrewd, and to try to be that sophisticated and your shrewdness, I think that would turn people off.
Plus, we don't know. I don't think the average voter in St. Louis City knows that they can vote for multiple candidates. Like, I really don't. I know people who are very well into St. Louis politics know that.
And I think that's going to be a part of the new campaigning, the way you campaign now. I mean, when you put your mailers out, when you do your phone banking, when you do door to door, when you doing your social media management blitz, you're gonna have to be able to make that a part of the new campaign, the messaging from the messaging standpoint. That people are going to have to know that, hey, now you can vote for more than one person. So if the candidate is not sophisticated enough to be able to make that a part of their platform in terms of messaging, then that's a problem.
My last question for you, let's go back to you for a second. Will you ever run for anything again, or is it over? Is the Jamilah Nasheed election time over forever?
In my tenure as a legislature, I can truly say that I had a fantastic ride, and the most important and thing that I can say that I'm proud of is my constituency services. And I believe that I can do constituency services while not being a legislator.
What are you gonna do now? Like, do you have another?
Whatever I want to do.
I mean, I know you can't become like, I don't know if you had any interest in like lobbying. I assume not. Although I think you would be a very Rodney Hubbard has been a great lobbyist for many years. So I'm not saying that you shouldn't be, but
a lot of people are asking me what I'm going to do now. I can't wait till your next chapter, this, that, and the other. Yeah. And I just say to them, stay tuned, just stay tuned. I was an entrepreneur before I was anything.
I was going to say, like, instead of being a lobbyist, why don't you just open up your own political consultant agency so you can send Richard Callow or Mike Kelly into oblivion or something. It just everyone's wants Jamilah Nasheed or something. Like, we talk about all the insiders are like, oh, who's on Team Callow or Team Kelly? Well, nobody would be any match for Team Jamilah Nasheed. You would make Barklage and Jeff Rowe look.
I like that though. I like your thinking though.
On that note, Senator, it's been a pleasure talking with you, and I don't think this will be our last conversation we have, but maybe for a while as an elected official. For all of our stories, stlpublicradio.org. Follow me on Twitter at @JRosenbaum. How can people follow you on social media, Twitter, Facebook, MySpace?
It's a pleasure, getting to know you and interviewing with you on issues and topics about the quality of life relating to my constituents.
Thank you, Senator. It was a pleasure talking with you as well. And until next time, so long.